Leaving your job isn't going to fix the problem. It helps. If you're in a workplace that's not fulfilling you and then is not helping you to be able to thrive, of course, leaving there is going to help it. But if there is elements within you that was causing that burnout, if you don't resolve those, they will follow to the new job with you. So I had left a job where I had burnt out. The new job I went to was so beautiful and wholesome. They literally had everyone sign as part of in their contract that you can't get fired for setting boundaries. Like I went to this new place where it was just so supportive, but then my brain was still in the other part. So there's an element where, yes, leaving your job and going to it, but if you're just like, I'm burnt out here, go next job, it will follow you.
Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster.
Today, we are going to be talking about burnout and practical resiliency with Kim James. She is a career woman with a decade of skin in the corporate game. She is passionate about helping others navigate their own career journey. I'm so excited about this. Welcome, Kim. It is wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background, about what you're doing now, and why they can be kind of excited about today's episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of background on me. Yeah, I've been in the corporate game for the last 10 years, which sounds absolutely crazy to say. In a background of that, started out in operations and then moved into marketing and have had a marketing career for the past 10 years throughout that. Currently now in more of in the tech space. But through in that, started learning TikTok to be able to educate our customers about TikTok as well. So I was like, well, I've got to know it so I can tell people how to use it. And then within that, I was posting a few different things, and my team of predominantly Gen Z, they had said to me, well, you give really good career advice. It's like, I'll just post a few things there. And the appetite was there, and it just went bonkers. And yeah, so the last 6 months has been talking about a lot of what I learned in my 20s, and a really key part of that, and what I'm excited to talk to you about today, is actually my story with burnout, what I learned, what I would tell others, and also really the story that I love to express with it is that I came out the other side. Burnout is not even part of my life anymore, and I really kind of want to share that narrative because it can feel like it's not something that you're ever going to have recovered from, but for me, it absolutely was.
That's awesome. Why don't we jump right into that? Why don't you talk us through your experience with burnout, how you knew you had burnout, what caused it from your job? Why don't you get us up to speed on that entire experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a key thing when it comes to burnout is that it's so many little small things that you don't actually realize that you're struggling with it. So for me, I had always been someone that was very career driven and was always someone that like, oh no, it's good stress. You know, I'm in like good pressure. This is what you want in your 20s. You're building your career. It was during the pandemic and I was working a job that was a bit more of a difficult environment to navigate. And that's when it really started to get into that chronic phase. I really started to realize that the mental messages that were coming through I wasn't listening to them. And that's where I was seeing it in physical symptoms. I think within 1 year, I had like 5 good nights sleep. So I had chronic insomnia, and I would go to the physio constantly in pain, and they would be like, you need to deal with this. This is coming from somewhere else. I had a dermatitis on my face, wasn't going away. And I think I was like, no, I'm fine. Like I've got a job and like, I'm happy. Like it couldn't possibly be something that's going wrong. And then it just got to the point where it is full on burnout, where you get to a point where you're just numb. And I don't know what to move forward. I don't know where to go. I haven't had a good night's sleep in probably the last 300 days. So for me, it really reached that point. And that's where I had to actually stop and go, hang on, I am out of balance here. I don't have a good relationship to my career. I can see that it's the workplace that's having an impact, but also like, why within me is this happening? So I have always been someone that was like, you know, no one's going to fix this for me. I've got to get in and do the work. And was fortunate enough to be able to see a therapist. And I just said to her, I've clearly got a bad work ethic. I'm in my 20s at that point. I'm doing this for another 40 plus years. Like, I can't keep going on like this. And she said, all right, we're going to fix it. And we're going to make sure that you're working for you and you're not doing it to prove of others. And yeah, that was the journey that we went on.
Yeah, I love that you have called out a few things so far, which is one, sometimes our systems will warn us when something's not right, right? It will tell us, you know, your body will respond in a new way and say, hey, this isn't good for you. And it's interesting because sometimes I'll talk to clients and they'll be struggling with different health issues and they're telling me, you know, I just want to get promoted. I just want to get to the next level. I just want to keep progressing my career. Meanwhile, these health issues are there and they're ruminating and they're making their struggle more difficult by trying to chase things that may not be good alignment for their system and for who they are. And the second thing that I want to touch on that you mentioned is, you know, going to therapy and getting that outside perspective, getting that outside support, getting that outside mentality, because sometimes we are so closed in the way we think, the way we approach situations, the way we want to live our lives, or we think we want to live our lives, that we can't always see exactly what's happening, right? It's the reason that coaches like myself and therapists are so successful, is because it's a lot easier for us to look at somebody and be like, no, don't,
Yeah, that's not
don't
working.
with that. Much easier than as yourself to look at yourself and go, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. So I love that you called out both of those. So what are some of those misconceptions that you see when it comes to burnout, where people expect one thing, but maybe the way that burnout is manifesting is a little bit different in reality?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The easiest way to explain burnout is that there's like three parts of it. There's like the three R's of burnout. Step one, that recognition. And that's exactly what you've just said as well. It's like recognizing how I'm going, not working. I need to change, and all these little small things, and going, oh yeah, I did work back late, and then I'm not going out on the weekend, and I'm doing all these things. Oh, hang on. Maybe I am at that point, and I'm at that chronic point. That second part is when you get into that restabilize, and you have to just like, okay, stop. And then the third part is resilience. I think when it comes to burnout, there is a few different ones. The first one, that sounds so controversial, leaving your job isn't going to fix the problem. It helps. If you're in a workplace that's not fulfilling you and that is not helping you to be able to thrive, of course, leaving there is going to help it. But if there is elements within you that was causing that burnout, if you don't resolve those, they will follow to the new job with you. So I had left a job where I had burnt out. The new job I went to was so beautiful and wholesome. They literally had everyone sign as part of in their contract that you can't get fired for setting boundaries. Like, I went to this new place where it was just so supportive, but then my brain was still in the other part. So there's an element where, yes, leaving your job and going to it, but if you're just like, I'm burnt out here, go next job, it will follow you. Because it's really about setting up those elements of resilience to be able to have you in a good position, so that when life and all the problems that can come up you're in a better place to be able to take that. The second one as well is that you can actually get burnt out from boredom. And I bought every book under the sun when I burnt out. There's definitely a lot more now. This was a few years ago, but the burnout from boredom is a really interesting one. And that's where, especially, I'm interested to know your thoughts of this, but as a career coach, and where you look at someone's life as a whole instead of just as their career. But burnout from boredom is where you're not, fulfilled. Like, everyone's life has a certain level of arousal within it. You need to have the things that make you you. And so you can actually get burnt out from that mundane. And I think throughout, for myself as well, I do look back and think that I got burnt out more because it was during the pandemic, when all other different parts that made you you were taken away. Your hobbies, you weren't doing them. Your family, you weren't seeing them. So the cup of career, everything was poured into that. So it was very easy for that to happen. And I think that that's sometimes one where if you're burnt out from boredom, you think, oh my God, no, there's no problem going on. Like, what do I possibly have to be upset about? So you tell yourself that you're not, but actually, yeah, you're not fulfilled.
I'm so excited about these two that you mentioned, because I feel like they are underrepresented and absolutely accurate. So I'm going to jump to your first one about leaving your workspace is not going to fix your problem. It's very interesting in my line of work, because I am a career coach. I do help people progress, find success, and I am focused on playing the game. And I think a lot of people misconstrue that to mean I need to work more. And the very first thing that I tell every client who signs up with me is, my goal in this program is that you work less, right? I want you working less, but I want you working smarter. I want you working on the right things, and I want you to have good boundaries, because boundaries, and I've talked about this on other podcast episodes as well, they force you to prioritize the most important work. You can't do everything because you have a boundary. And so you have to do the most important work, which actually makes you look better as an employee, as a manager, as a leader, as a contributor. And so if you don't have those practices and you jump from one company to another, you're right. I think you just burn out all over again. Now, you can get lucky where you jump to a much better culture, and some of that culture helps you heal some of your own boundary setting issues, right? There's sometimes correlation, but not causation, right? Sometimes you can get lucky and that job jump does help. But what I would say is that if you're not fixing you, I 1,000% agree. A new workplace is not going to fix it for you, right? If anything, you're just going to carry bad habits into a new place. And to the second thing you said, the burnt out by boredom, I have like two different takes on this. I'm curious, have you ever worked a job where you didn't have enough to do? Where you just like sat around all day, where they like didn't. To me, that's like my worst nightmare. Like the worst possible thing you can do is sit me at a desk and not give me anything to do. And one of my leaders actually jokes with me because when I first started working for him, I'd been there like maybe a month or two. And I was like, hey, I just want to let you know I have some bandwidth. I feel comfortable. I could take on some more tasks. And of course, fast forward 2.5 years, he's like, remember when you asked me for more work? I'm like, yeah, we don't have to talk about that now. I have plenty of work now. We're good. But because for me, that burnt out by boredom, if I'm sitting around all day and I don't have enough to do, that weighs on me because I'm a validation through productivity person. So if I'm not being productive, I don't feel validated.
Yes.
But then I have to sit there for 9 hours. I can't like go to the park, go do laundry, or do things that I want to do because I have to. So I think the burnout by boredom, for me, there's almost two versions. There's a version where legitimately you're not given enough to spark your interest or to keep you engaged, and that just drains you. And the flip side is the one that you mentioned of like, but your life also has to lack boredom, right? So it has to be full of activities. You have to have your decompression. And I always joke, don't talk to me before I drink coffee and work out. Because if I have, those are my two recovery activities. If you try to talk to me before both of those are complete, I am not as nice of a person. And so I think this totally resonates because when I work with clients, we do passion assessments. What do you really love? What fills you up? Because otherwise you do burn out. So I'd love to hear like on all of that, does that kind of align with your take of how you see being burnt out by boredom, how you see kind of like those boundary setting?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the thing about burnout is getting out of habitual burnout. It's the fact that you're never going to be able to not be stressed. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, no, I don't have a restless night's sleep. Absolutely. But I don't have chronic night's sleep. I feel like now I've built enough tools in my tool belt so that when I know that these things happen, I'm like, whoa, where are we at? And I'm listening to the signs. And that's where most people go, recognition, I'm burnt out, reset, I need to rest. And then I've rested. Okay, I'm good. Back. And then you go back to your ways. And then, oh, wait, I'm burnt out again. Oh, wait, and resist. We're not getting to that resilience. And that resilience piece is when you're building up your own personal ways of how you respond to stress and to stresses and why am I acting like this? And like, okay, when I do get to that point, how do I pull myself back from getting over it? And I think the thing about burnout, I am petrified of the thought of getting back to that. Like I took photos of it because I said to myself, you were never getting back to that level again. So yeah, I agree because with those boundaries and setting that, that's in that resilience. And if you don't do that third part, it's not nice to do. It's the ugly work. Like your brain is trained to stop you from going and doing anything that it doesn't like to do that's harmful. So you will then find that like, you'll be trying to think and process and it's like, I don't want to do this. Absolutely not. And will like pull itself out. So that's that third part that's going to help you be set up to be able to have that new foundations of life, but you have to do the work to get to that. I would say anyone that's listening and feeling like, okay, I want to do that. That's where it's things like opportunities for therapy to speak to someone outside of, your own space of it. Journaling. Like sometimes you don't realize what's in your brain until I just journaled and I got it out every single day to be able to do that. And then identifying like things that were triggering, like even when I'm in a new workplace, okay, what were those things that were going off and then start to build that. So that you get to a point where you're just not having that reaction as much to stress. When it comes to the burnout by boredom part, completely agree. I was working a job in commercial estimating early in my career, and my performance was down, and I got so upset about it. But I look at it now, I'm like, of course my performance was down. I'm a very creative person, and I was so bored that of course my performance was down. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to do that. I'm like, what am I doing here? This is not my job. But the thing that when I talk about it is, I think there's a misconception that there's either your career is your personality or your career is not your personality. You know, there's the live to work or work to live, kind of like two buckets. Not necessarily. And the reason I say burnout from boredom of your life overall, for me, I am a very passionate person. I love in a career space, but then I make sure that I have all the other things outside of that. You can be someone that you're like, I work, pays the bills, but that works, that pays to have a lifestyle outside of it. I like to go hiking on the weekend. I like to go full driving. I like to do all those things that make me me. So sometimes those things that you get out of it isn't there. And that's why whenever I help people and I talk to them about the third part, I talk about the 3-bucket theory. And this is like what my brain, it's probably somewhere else, it probably came from somewhere, but my brain thought it. And this is how I like conceptualize. And when I find myself losing that balance, I look at my life. Your life is 3 buckets. 1, career, financial. How do you make money? You still need to. I've come from a community in Australia near Byron Bay that a lot of people, live the beautiful life and don't work, but for majority of us, you got to work. So we've got our career financial. Your second one is hobbies. What are the things that make you new? And they don't have to be financial. Do you like to go to the gym? Do you like to catch up and have coffee with friends? Do you like to do sports? Like, what are those little small things that make you you? And then the third part is that human connection as well, whether or not that's family, friends, and like have those 3. During the pandemic, these 2, your human connection and your bucket of your hobbies was taken. So for so many of us, we were burnt out and we were like, oh, it's our job. It could have been. And for me, absolutely that was it. But it was also because like this cup was overflowing and your other 2 were empty. So if you find yourself getting to a point when you're like, oh, I feel really burnt out. Okay, but have you been catching up with people? Are you getting to a Friday night? You're like, I cannot possibly go out this weekend, or I could not go to, my Pilates class tonight. Are you actually in alignment with your 3 cups, or is like some empty and some overflowing?
I love these tactical tips that you're sharing. And it's interesting because I was talking to somebody the other day that the way they plan their boundaries for work, I thought this was so interesting. So I'm going to talk about it with you because I feel like you would have an interesting take on this as well, is that they would take their schedule, right? So let's say a week, and they would block in your case, your second and third bucket. Right. So where are all my hobbies? Where do they fall? Whether that's I'm going to the gym or I'm going on a walk or I'm getting coffee, they would put in all of their hobbies and then they would put in their human connection piece. What am I doing with my kids? When am I meeting up with a friend? Where am I going out and socializing? Am I going on a date with my spouse? They would layer all of that. And they said that only the time that remains can be used for work. And I think that so many of us, right? So many of us do it the opposite way, though. We go, okay, from 8 a.m. until 5, I'm at work all week. And then I can squeeze in a workout class on Tuesday night, a coffee on Saturday morning, a social event Saturday night, and we work around it. And what I thought was so interesting about her approach is she's like, I put my social life first, and then I layer in work. Now, obviously, to your point, you have to make money. You have to have finances. So if something at work gets scheduled over one of those personal activities, like we got to do some moving, right? We got to do some navigating of that time. But I loved that approach because I think me personally, I have always put career finances first. Everything else gets squeezed in. And some of that is my personality type. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm like a validation through productivity person. If I'm not doing stuff, I feel like I'm not contributing. And I even made the funny example yesterday. My husband cleaned my whole house. I have a wonderful husband. Don't know if I've mentioned that yet this episode. Cleaned my whole house. And I was kind of annoyed because I couldn't help. And I was like, excuse me, I need to clean something because this is not balanced right now and it bothers me. And he was like, no, you just like relax. You've got a lot of work going on. You've got other stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll just sit here, I guess. But it is like I have that productivity mindset. So I don't always bucket 2 and 3 high enough priority. And then you're right, when those diminish, everything else diminishes. And so I love that take. And it's also something very practical, I feel like, for the audience is, do you have things in each bucket? Right?
Yeah.
Post-COVID, did you reinstate human connections, or have you not talked to any of your friends in 4 years? Like,
Yeah.
do you need a snack break with somebody you like?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think so many of us fall in the trap of like setting New Year's resolutions and New Year's goals, and I'm going to do all these things. Honestly, just have a look at the buckets. Are you feeling them? And then if you get to a point you're like, oh, no, I'm actually not. If you're at a state of burnout, yeah, you will need to rest more than usual people, because you need to actually, like, if you've been in chronic stress up here, and then you'll just feel a drop, and you will find that balance in between as well. I think there is an element though, if you are going through burnout, people can fall into a trap of setting too many things to avoid dealing with burnout, when you're like, oh, so now I'm like doing all these like activities and seeing all these people to kind of like avoid through it as well. But yeah, that's definitely helped me to be able to work out that balance. But I think it goes back to that story, and I'm going to butcher it, I hope I don't, but where there was the man that was the fisherman, and then a corporate guy says to him, he's like, oh, what do you do each day? I fish, and, I spend time with my kids and my family. And he's like, oh, you could,
I love
like
that story.
That is exactly this. And it's like, I wait, you know what I mean? And I think for so many of us, we fall in the track of like, I've got to hustle in my 20s, I've got to do all these things. And then I get to 30 and I have a life. No, no. And that's where I think there's the element of the conversation. And I'd love to know your thoughts, because it's very much here in Australia as well, where everyone's saying, oh, the younger generation don't want to work. The younger generation are looking at it and going, well, I work till I'm 65. First of all, I go to high school, I go to university, I get a job. The job doesn't guarantee me, well, actually, go to university doesn't guarantee me the job. I get the job, I can't afford the house. And then to have the kids, and then I work till I'm 65. Can I retire at my 65? And then I just retire and I buy a caravan and travel around Australia. But then I'm like, I do all this and get to there. Whereas now, I think a lot more people are looking at it as like, what are those mini retirements? How can I have small little pieces throughout my life that really fulfill me in that as well?
Yeah. So for the story that Kim was mentioning, I'm going to tag it in the show notes. So if you were listening and you were like, Kendall jumped in and she got where we were going with that, but I did not get where we were going with that, I will tag the video. But essentially it's about, you can turn your fishing business into this huge conglomeration and then you can relax. And he's like, yeah, but I already relaxed just running my fishing business. Why would I do that? Right. So it's a great video. We'll link it in the show notes. But I think secondarily to your question, I think, and I've talked about this with some other like Gen Z influencers who I've had on the podcast, the Gen Z work ethic question, right? I'm going to say first, they said the exact same thing about millennials when we entered. Millennials don't want to work. They're lazy. They don't show up. We got the same thing. And then now we're looking at Gen Z like, how dare you show up to work at 8:15 instead of 8 a.m., right? So some of this I think is just cyclical and it's stage-based and it's life-based, that in your 20s you want to have fun and you don't want to work. But I think the second piece is, to your point, there is an amount of balance that I think we've gotten away from. Like, people weren't meant, in my opinion, to work nonstop from 9 a.m. Monday morning until 5 p.m. Friday. Like, we're just not built that way. Our brains are trying to do too much all the time right now. I think it's very exhausting. We don't have time for family. You've got many more two-income households who don't have time to hang out with their kids or take them to sporting events or do whatever. And I have this conversation with mom friends of mine. All of us have somebody who helps take the kids to gymnastics, who helps pick the kids up from school, because we can't, because we all work. And I think what Gen Z is doing as they come into the workforce is they're more like, listen, work's going to be there and I'm going to do it, but I don't want to be having fun when I'm 65. I want to be having fun when I'm 25 and I can actually like appreciate it. And then like later I'll work really hard when I'm old and I don't want to do anything else. And I mean, it's not a bad plan, right?
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, I don't know if they have the same saying in Australia, but they used to say, by the time you can afford the car that you want, you're too old to use it, right? So like if you want a Corvette, like right now you're too young to afford it, but you could enjoy it. By the time you can afford it, you'll be too old to drive it around. And I think Gen Z is realizing that, and they're like, screw it, I'll just like, and not all of them, right? There's some very hardworking Gen Zers, is not to be a blanket statement, but I do think the general attitude is like, I'd rather have a good time now. And I don't know how opposed I am to that. If you show up and do your job when you're supposed to, I think it's great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was someone that finished high school, went straight to uni, straight from university, got a graduate program, got straight into the workforce. And I think this is where I kind of have the conversation. There's no one blanket answer. There's no, you have to get this particular job. There's no, you have to go big corporate. You have to go startup. You have to do this. There is time. I got to 30. Oh my gosh, 2 years ago. That's wild. I got to 30 and I was like, wow, why did I think I had to have everything figured out in my 20s? Like, I don't know if you saw, I also, there was a TikTok that I said about how I regretted rushing to being a people manager in my 20s. I pushed myself to get all the way to be there. And I just kind of got to my 30s. I'm like, you have a lot of time. Like, I'm 30 now. I'm still going for another, 30, probably 40 years. Why did I need it all figured out in the first 10? And I think realistically, people have asked me since, and they say, oh, what is something that has been so pivotal in your career? And I'm like, this is going to sound really, out of field, and it's not going to be the particular uni, and it's not going to be this particular course. It was doing therapy. It was understanding me. It was understanding how I was showing up. It was me having a very good relationship to burnout, to boundaries, but then also like understanding for myself how to self-validate as well, so that, I could appreciate what I was building for me instead of being just like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Like, stop and smell the roses. And I don't think that I could get to where I am now without having done that work. So if there's anything that I would say in your 20s is, work out what that work-life balance is for you, because that's going to be a lot more sustainable in the long term.
So how do you sustain this long term, right? I think, you've mentioned it already in this episode. We tend to ebb and flow. There are seasons of our life where we're like, I have so much balance. And then the next week something explodes and we're like, just kidding, I have zero boundaries and here I am again. So, what does resiliency long term look like? How do you maintain good boundaries, good work-life balance, avoid burnout when things are really busy and things are escalating rapidly?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where it comes back to. One part of it is having that ability to be able to look at your life in those 3 different buckets and be able to understand, have curiosity into why you burnt out so that you can identify what you need to improve and set new foundations within that. Those 3 buckets will help you when you ebb and throw, because exactly that word you said there, it's seasons. I think we've kind of gone, oh, girl boss, hustle. Oh, death to the girl boss, hustle. And then we've kind of gone this other way. There is times you need to girl boss. And I know I sound like a millennial saying that. There are seasons of your life. Right now, I am in a season where I have started to cultivate this community and open up these new opportunities. I'm probably in a lot stronger of a career part, but I'm very much looking at going, okay, well, hang on. If I really focus in this season of my life, then that next season, what does that look like? And can I have that opportunity as well? So it's not being afraid of that life comes in and out of seasons, and that there will be times where you're a bit head down. There will be other times where other things will be another priority as well. To have that long-term resiliency is to listen internally to the messages. What your body is telling you, what your mind is telling you is insights. If you are out of balance, like for me, I had chronic insomnia, I had a dermatitis on my face, my body was in pain, I was exhausted. Those are messages from within. My psychologist, she said to me, waking up at 4 a.m. is an alarm internally that will not stop going off until you realize what is setting it off. So to have that long term, listen to the messages coming, I know, right? Listen to the messages coming from within your body and be able to then actually just recognize it and then readjust when you need. But if you avoid what your body is telling to you, it will keep telling you until you go, well, hang on. Now I need to just now I need to rest for like 3 months.
Yes. I don't know if you saw that meme around the holidays, but I sent it to some girlfriends of mine because it was like me opening a gift from my body. And I'm like, oh, you got me a gift? That's so nice. She opens the gift and it's like sickness. And she's like, did you just give me a cold? And the body is like, well, you said you've been so stressed. And you really needed to rest. So like, here, you get a cold so that you'll rest. And she's like, that's not what I wanted. And the body's like, yeah, but you weren't resting. Yeah. So cold. like take a breath, right? And I do think, you touched on so many good things throughout there. There is this seasonality to it. There is this paying attention to your body, this awareness. And I would add additionally something that I found helpful in my own life, my own journey with working way too hard too many times in my life, is to time bound things. If you are in a season of hustle, and you kind of alluded to this, you can't be in a season of hustling forever. So like, for how long are we hustling? Is this a 6-month? Is this a 3-month? Is this a 2-week really stressful period? Right now I'm in a very busy season for me. March, April are always super busy. Both my kids and I all have birthdays in the next 2 months. I have big work things. I compete for the Mrs. Colorado pageant. Like, there's a lot that happens in these like 3 months. It's wild. But it's time bound, because like May 1st, we're back to normal life. Like, we can't operate like this forever. So I give myself like a 6-week chunk of being a crazy person at the end of March through April, and then we go back to real life. And so I think also, if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, well, when I'm in that seasonality, how do I keep seasonality from taking over my life? You listen to your body, like Kim said, you get aware of those triggers, like Kim said, and then you time bound it of like, I'm only going to allow this to a certain point, and I'm making plans to get out of this season now so that I actually can. So I think all of this has been so good. There have been so many good like tidbits and tactical tips within this episode, but I always ask, what are your parting words for our listener? If there's one thing you could tell everybody to go do tomorrow to kind of help prevent this burnout, to help build this resiliency, what's the one takeaway you would give everybody?
Not be afraid of work-life balance, not be afraid of like having a version of you outside of here. I would say get a piece of paper, 3 buckets, career, hobbies, friends, line that out, and then identify exactly that. How can I plan this in? How can I plan in for being able to see friends? How can I plan in for doing a hobby? If you don't know what a hobby is and you're like, I'm in, my 20s, I don't have hobbies. What are those small little things? Because those little sparks that you really enjoy, that's going to help you feel more like you outside of it. If you are in a situation of where you're feeling like you might be burning out, listen to your body and what is it telling you? Because they're insights that you're out of balance. You can get back into balance. You can recover from burnout. It's not a part of my life anymore. I look back at it, and that's pretty much what I want to tell to people, is that you can recover from it, but have a look at your life in a map, listen to the insights that are coming from it. Maybe that's me coming from having like a business and marketing background of strategy. I kind of look at it in that way. But the work that you do for this will set you up for a life that is better than what you could have ever imagined, because you get to have new foundations that will help you do more than you thought that you could.
That's awesome. I think that's great advice and great takeaways. And in fact, in like my head, I have the Tony Stark screen of like my 3 buckets, and I'm filling them right now mentally. So I think that's a great takeaway for everybody who's listening. Kim, it's been so awesome having you on the show. If people want to find you, if they want to check you out, where can they go?
Absolutely. You can find me on TikTok at Kim Elizabeth James 1. Unfortunately, I got locked out once, so the other version was me. There's a 1 at the end. Or on Instagram at Career Girl Redefined, redefining what that means for you and how to know your worth and own your path is what I'm here to help you do. So yeah, that's where you can find me at the moment.
That's amazing. We will tag both of those in the show notes, Kim, so that people can come over and find you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you listened to this episode and you loved it and you thought you want more guests like Kim and you want to learn more about these topics, make sure you give us 5 stars, you comment down below, and we look forward to having you back as a guest in the future. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.